One of the major sticking points between the US and China is, as we talked about, rare earths. Beijing's been defending the new export controls that it announced on them last week. Now, you may know these metals, rare earth metals, are crucial to the manufacturing of all sorts of electronic goods, but China controls global supplies. Well, a spokeswoman for China's Commerce Ministry said the US had grossly distorted and exaggerated China's measures, and that exports for civilian use would still be approved. Let's talk to Harry Broadman, who's, among many other things, the former US Assistant Trade Representative during the presidency of George Bush. Good to have you with us. And talk to me about that importers. China says, look, this is totally overblown. We'll still provide for civilian use. But it really underlines just how far apart these two nations are. The world's two biggest economies, the US and China, are at loggerheads about everything from oil to trade to rare earths. I mean, where does this go?
Well, I do think that, the biggest problem is you got the two largest economies and the relationship is uncertain. It's not only that they're putting tariffs on and off, it's that they are going on and off. And I think, in contrast to what the IMF leader just said, we can look at tariffs as measures of whether there's protectionism or not. My concern is beyond that. Particularly in the U.S. side, is we have policy uncertainty. The president puts tariffs on in one place and he takes them off in another place, and that really chills investment. And we can begin to see that now in the numbers of the employment numbers in the U.S. So this is not a good strategy that Mr. Trump is engaging in. And I also think that the people are missing a point about China, which is Xi Jinping, obviously is worried about his relationship with the U.S. But there's also a domestic audience that Mr. Xi has to worry about, and I know that sounds ludicrous given his singular standing there. But there's a lot of domestic, seething sort of just below the surface about what's going on with China's economy, and many in the public there are not happy about inbound workers and inbound investment. So Mr. Xi is trying to balance lots of different variables here.
What we heard from the IMF was a direct criticism of that use of tariffs and what that means for the global economy, calling on those G7 nations to work together to maybe, extract a bit of leverage when it comes to Beijing. I mean, Japan is certainly suggesting that. Do you think they have any power here?
Well, frankly, that's music to my ears, because I used to be the lead science and technology negotiator for the U.S., and I've always maintained that working multilaterally with our G7 advanced democratic allies is actually a pretty potent measure to exploit. Now, whether that can be done, I think is somewhat of a tall order, but we have much more in common among the seven of us than we do with any other set of economies in the world. And through collective action, that can be actually a pretty potent tool to tame China.
But there's an irony here, though, isn't there, that President Trump, doesn't like these transnational organizations. He's the first that wants to rip up the rule book and say that, America first. Why would then the G7 come together and say, let's work together and figure this out?
Well, I completely agree with you, but it could be that if the other six nations, sitting around the table say, listen, why don't we do something collectively? Mr. Trump can say, I'll do that, but I reserve the right to do things just as you guys do with your own economies. But to date, that G7 alliance is not very strong. So I would at least try that. And I think, that kind of bargaining with China could well be far more effective than simply bilateral, having China deal with the UK, China dealing with the US, and going arm in arm, as I say, as collective action. That could be a potent tool. Now, that's easier said than done, but it hasn't even been tried yet effectively. So I'm not going to dismiss something that hasn't even been tried.
Harry, good to talk to you. Always good to get your insight on issues like this. Thank you, Harry Broadman there, former US Assistant Trade Representative in the US. Thank you. Grateful for your time.